Hi everyone. I'll just check if my remote works. Yes? Yeah, so that's me. Okay, at first I kind of lied to you because this presentation is divided into two parts. The first one will be kind of theoretical, kind of abstract, and this is because I need you to kind of have a bit of a context into what kind of approach I'm taking to this topic. And because I know a lot of you kind of want more practical advice, more actionable advice and tips and tricks, from maybe like 10 or 15 minutes in, there will be slides starting with T and T, like tips and tricks, when I try to mash into as much info as I could into the slide. So photograph those, they won't change during the slide, so it won't annoy you that the slide changed after you took a photo. And if you don't have a photo, then contact me on LinkedIn. So that being said, with my background, I know you also don't really care what companies I worked for because they were not big. So just for the context of what I did, is that I was an intern in a Norwegian company, but then I worked as a QA for the Playway Capital Group, so I was effectively a remote QA working in a small office and contacting with the devs remotely. That was before the pandemic. So I was already kind of onboarded into this mostly remote method of communication with the developers. From that job, I jumped into a small Playway company, basically Playway family company, where I was pushed into a management position. And this management position happened to me right before the pandemic. So I had no guidance, no senior producers or managers to kind of guide me into like how to organize the workplace, how to organize documentation, budgeting, and stuff like that. So our team had to kind of come up with all our results at the go, basically. I then changed jobs during the pandemic, so I had to onboard myself as a manager in a different company. And then I changed jobs again, and I kind of left management behind, became a team member as a part-time designer in another company, and then I also took up lecturing at a university, also fully remotely. And then to top it all off, this remoteness thing, I bought a laptop and I kind of started doing this digital nomad stuff light for like half a year. So apart from working for a big company fully remotely, I kind of covered most of the bases I could cover with my perspective. So that being said, in this abstract theoretical perspective, what really changes between on-site game dev and remote game dev? And from my perspective, the fundamental process of production is already digitized. So it's kind of arbitrary that the programmer has to sit next to another programmer if the product they are physically producing is stored like in the repository in some other room effectively, or maybe even on a different continent when it comes to outsourcing, because outsourcing effectively means that part of the team works remotely from another continent. So the production process is not changed that much. Of course, it kind of is, but not really that much when we compare to sales, where we compare to manufacturing, where we compare to service jobs. Obviously, like that was the topic of discussion during the pandemic. But what changes is the human communication, and I kind of, from my perspective, you have to divide it into communication, behavior, and meaning making, because by taking people out of the office and placing a computer between one and the other, you are kind of forcing them to relearn a lot of things that they kind of learned on the job, to do it through the medium of a computer. And this is because I will not really be focusing that much on production management and production methodologies, because I think they are not as much affected as process management and people management. So this will be like the focus of this topic, of this presentation. Now, this is like maybe the first time I ever citing a US government agency, but this is a GSA Regional Commissioner Sharon Wall, and she said that telework doesn't create management problems, it reveals them. And this reveal of those management problems, to kind of make it more concrete, we have to see why remoteness reveals those problems. And it reveals them because most managers look like those people. So they are the most overdressed people in the room. They are generally very efficient at talking with people, at managing communication between different departments, stuff like that. So there was this meme about that game dev is basically like 100 people that are socially inept, led by a few people that have ADHD, and they make a lot of money. So that was like basically the joke part of how I see managers in like typical kind of workplace. But in a remote workplace, I've noticed that what is more efficient for managing this process is if your managers look more like this. So they are protocol droids because they need to manage computer-human communication because between every person there will be a computer, so you need to understand what the person is trying to communicate or say or do, or how they feel when they're sitting at the computer, how they will communicate it through the computer, and how the computer will then communicate it to another team member. So, and from this, we can see like what was actually lost. And what was lost is we obviously lost all communication and management tools that are inherent to the office building itself. And these are like passive methods of management that are usually not really that much talked about. And there are like punch-in cards if you have like punch-in either on the door, or if you have literal punch-in cards still somewhere, announcement boards, good old shield of paper on the wall, office space proxemics. So, you know, that the boss will have his office in a very prominent place somewhere, that someone less important or less needing to have interaction with other people will have his office somewhere down below, out of sight. Some people will have glass offices, others will not. So there is a lot of things going on, sometimes kind of fairly passively, and we are losing all of those things. And of course, we are also losing easily eavesdropping and extracting official information through unofficial channels. And this is incredibly important because if you have a lot of unofficial communication going on in your company, because you know just someone talks to Kate in HR or to Tom in administration, and they will tell them something like months ahead before the CEO or the board will tell them to do something. You are effectively creating a method of priming your teams or priming certain parts of your company to do things, and you don't even know how they know that something happens. And then you take away all those offices, all those punch cards, all those sheets of paper, and suddenly, in theory, everything worked before the pandemic, and now it doesn't, because you have cut off a lot of unofficial communications that you were not really aware that they exist. And from like the personal point of view, so more of a specific employee, of a specific team member, you are also cutting out the physical social dynamics and social ways of contacting people. So there is no body language, there is no eye contact, and eye contact is incredibly important because it kind of lowers the bar for human interaction. Or, you know, a new employee can be sitting at their desk kind of looking helpless, and someone will notice that, passively come up to them and help them. And they will not have to schedule a call, they won't have to admit that they are wrong, that they have a problem. So those are like small things that are easy to miss if you're not looking for them, but they make a lot of difference. Spatial, the ability to monitor and help other team members personally. And when I mean monitor, I mean not monitor that if they are working, but just monitor what are you really doing? What are you doing right now? How are you doing it? Like there is, and again, a lot of this just happens naturally, that you're just kind of going back from coffee and you see that the junior is doing something really, really stupid right now, and you need to stop it right now because something really bad will happen if you don't just run up to his desk. And like, you know, you don't have a task, you don't have a workflow somewhere in Jira to do such a thing, so you just kind of do it naturally. And social, so cigarette breaks, lunch breaks, water cooler conversation parties. So you are also obviously cutting a lot of that. So if we bold those specific 3 words, and even more, just exclude them altogether from the slide, we see that these were the first kind of fronts of attack after the pandemic. So from my point of view, the wrong takeaway that were taken by many companies, of course, not every company in every way, etc., is that body language will be substituted by constant video calls and meetings, that monitoring will be work tracking software and like a lot of work tracking software, even work tracking, not just work tracking for, you know, creating burn down charts or actually measuring productivity of certain departments, but just monitoring if people are working at all. And again, if they are activity tracking software and occasional giant party. So check if they are even at the computer, and then we are kind of substituting this lack of social interaction by just creating a giant party once every 6 months or once a year. Now, from my point of view, and like looking at different places where I worked with, and because different companies I worked on had like different things figured out, sometimes accidentally, sometimes intentionally, I would say that what is more important than video calls is the ability to be present, quote unquote, digitally and convey emotions to coworkers. And I will get into what it practically means a little bit later. Monitoring is the ability to effectively communicate the state of one's work to the whole team by whatever means necessary. And that way, and we will also go what are the means to communicate the state of one's work. And breaks. This is developing a new rhythm of remote work and leisure, because you can't really translate the rhythm of working in the office directly into working from home, and you also can't really translate the rhythm of working remotely, but maybe as like a typical person who works like in a home office, so like audio guy, to being the lead programmer who works remotely. So there is a lot of things to be done. I'm not really sure if they are really, it will take a while before we kind of settle it into it. So it's just a primer. I don't really have all the answers. But the one thing that if you are to get nothing out of this presentation, then just from my perspective, get this thing, is that you need to understand all forms of digital communication and social dynamics. So don't just be like the typical quote-unquote boomer or millennial who doesn't understand TikTok, who doesn't understand Discord, who doesn't understand the new tools. For me, always the golden example of people who understand like digital communication and internet communication is the youngest generation, because for them, the most sophisticated, most advanced methods of communication digitally are the default. So I always look to them what they are doing, and I'm less inclined to look at the older people and see what they feel comfortable with, because they are not really the future in digital communication. Prioritize ease and expediency of all forms of work-related communication. There's an asterisk there because I consider breaks and leisure also kind of work-related. But I will not get into that because we just have 45 minutes and I want to show you as much tips and tricks as possible. So I will now get to this more filled-in slides, and I will discuss practically what I just laid out in this more abstract form. So video calls. I just kind of attacked them previously, but they have their place absolutely in a remote workplace, and they are especially important when you use when the non-verbal context is important. So hiring, firing, evaluations, and similar, basically. Like if possible, I would even, in my practice as a manager, I would rather come in to see the person directly. I would get them for a beer, I would go to the office, whatever. But if that is not possible, do a video call. And there's maybe one exception. So firing. This is a controversial topic. So for one side says that it is not really respectful to fire someone over the internet. I would say that the minimum amount of respect is the video call. But I'm not sure if you should ask them to come to the office only to be fired in the office, and then they have to do the walk of shame back to their home. Like, for me, this is cruel and unusual punishment. So I would kind of stick with video call. Hiring does not have to be video called for the entire process, but at least once, it would be very useful, and especially evaluations and similar if you can be in person. Because I was on the receiving side of receiving an evaluation where I was very happy that my face was not visible to my supervisor, because that would reveal a lot of things that they maybe would not want to see, basically, in my face. But to do that, video calls need to be normalized. So you can't really associate being taken to a video call to being fired. That this is like the only thing that will happen to you at the company. This is the only place when you show your face. No, you should maybe require people to show up their face 1 day per week or during a specific event. Like, I don't really have the answer here because I never really seen that implemented incredibly correctly. So I will kind of be working on it. But I'm just saying that this is my hunch, that you need to have some kind of a carrot because, and this is my very deeply held belief, that a video call is inherently a stick. that they are very taxing and intrusive because you have to show your home, you have to show your face, you have to show maybe your cohabitants, basically, like your partner, your wife, maybe your children, your dogs. And it kind of requires a lot of self-discipline to have like perfectly neat background or find your like specific office in your home. Not everyone has the size of a home. Not everyone kind of lives alone, stuff like that. So if you are not working sales, I wouldn't really say that this is the that this is really required. And also, I've never seen people do that if they are not forced to do so. Like, unless they are forced to, and like maybe they have this habit of turning on the camera, they will not do it of their own volition. So that, to me, is a big sign that this is really, you're asking a lot. Now, but screen sharing is like one of the holy trinity of digital communication for me, because all team members should be able to stream and record their screen. And streaming is great for onboarding for new people. From my perspective, like a new hire should be required to share their screen all the time so that people with more experience could check in on them, see what they are doing, and not just rely on the issues that the junior is bringing to the senior, because there will be a lot of issues that they will be doing without knowledge, really. And it's better to see what they are doing, but also it also comes handy. Like, I will not be going through all the points. Yeah, I hope that you can read, you can take it home. But the thing is also that if you are not really attacking people for sharing their screen, they will be doing it all the time. Seniors or inter-departments share screens. This will be like the default thing to do. Like once they are accustomed to doing so, they will be doing it all the time. Like, video calls will not be really done. This will be done all the time. So also recording. Recording is very important because recording allows you to asynchronously communicate with your team members. So if you are going for a vacation as like a lead designer or like a senior level designer, you can create a tutorial for the younger part of your team and then go for a vacation. The problem with recording your screen yet, and this will date very quickly, is that as of yet we don't really have speech-to-text recognition inherent in many like recording software, but this will happen very soon. So if you can just record a tutorial that has like an hour, the speech-to-text software will just transcribe what you said, and then you can have this text as a searchable database, like in some like tutorial database of your company. So that will be extremely helpful. Right now, I would suggest like using tutorials as an additional part to like a written documentation of whatever is being presented, but I think that may not be as important later down the road. I will also be talking about Discord, because for me Discord for small teams was like the most useful tool at all. So if you need to have a frame of reference, this is my frame of reference. It's not Teams, not Slack, it's Discord. Now, yes, I kind of went through this. Like, there are like a lot of small things that can be shown in screen sharing. Like, I think I lost 40 minutes with one programmer once talking about like an issue I had, and it stemmed only from the fact that he had a different view mode on his engine than I did, and we just couldn't find the single file. And it was like incredibly annoying. And if we shared our screen earlier, we would have noticed that earlier. So it's just like small things that kind of really like a death by 1,000 cuts. So you can also use screen sharing to watch games, movies, YouTube together as a form of reference sharing or team bonding, especially if you have a very dispersed team and a small budget and you can't really afford to take them into like one party every 3 months or 6 months. You can then watch movies or play games. I really recommend Crab Game because it's low spec, it's free on Steam, and it is a very fun game to play with your team as part of like integrations and generally remote HR exercises. Very badly formatted, but whatever. Remember to hide your private message notification pop-ups and be mindful what info you have on desktop in your browser tabs. Because small teams will often not really have like professional different computer to work on, so they will be working on a private computer. And I had a few awkward situations where messages that should not be seen publicly were seen publicly when people were screen sharing. But this is like just one tick to disable those. Now, However, screen sharing or not, this is how I feel logging into most of remote workplaces every day. So I come in, there is nobody there. Like, I know there is like a green dot next to someone's profile, but, I just don't see the person. I just don't feel them anywhere. I know I can write to them, but they are not there. And I just couldn't explain what it is until I started to work for one company which implemented voice chat rooms on Discord. And they required to be always present at the group voice chat when you are working. So when I came into work, I already saw who is in work, like who is already there. And like the unwritten rule, because this was not mandated, they just wanted us to be visible publicly, but we kind of organized ourselves however we wanted. And there was a common room when everyone who started work was just coming into the common room, saying hello, hello. There was like a small off-topic conversation. And then if you had something important to do, then you would usually go to the quiet room. So it would be like a muting room where you are able to focus, work, but you are still visible as being present at your workplace. So if you stopped working, you were tired, or maybe you had like this brain dead part of your job when you have to just check 150 boxes in specific parts of the engine to make something work, or you're rendering, or maybe you're just doodling references, then people would usually come up to the common room and just talk with people, maybe exchange those water cooler conversations, and then go back to the quiet room. Or if it happened that two programmers needed to talk about programming and they didn't want to like dominate the common room conversation, they would just go to a different room. We had like side rooms that they were called like bar or like a cave and stuff like that. And they would just go there, discuss things there, share their screens and whatever. It was like an organic meeting without scheduling a meeting, and they were just working there. There was also a one-on-one room where you could have this private conversation, and there was also an AFK room where if you discovered that you are not really there, it would automatically place you in AFK. And if you went to dinner, you also just pressed I'm AFK, and you went to dinner, went back, went to common room or the quiet room. And it was incredibly nice. And I think this is the perfect, for me, compromise between video calls and not being able to communicate immediately with other people. Yeah, here, if you want, oh, sorry for the bad formatting, but I think that AFK will be fairly obvious. So for me, that was incredibly, incredibly changing, and not just for me, because I noticed that for some time, coworkers that left the company or generally left the company and went somewhere else, and sometimes to very big studios in Poland, they would still log in to the voice chat of the old company because they were not taken the privileges, because they had nothing else like it in their new workplace. They just could work with chat, they could work with email, but they just went back there. And when they were finally kicked out of the chat because they were no longer an employee, then they created their own private server where they were able to just sit together and talk. Not, of course, share screens, not really break any NDAs, but just kind of have a feeling that someone is there for you and someone is able to communicate with you. And this is like, I think this is the most important part, like the most important discovery I made over the years, because as I'm a lecturer, I was able to ask students in my class, do they use things like that? And it turns out they do. That they have like their own private, they can join art servers, programming servers, and stuff like that. And they work, for example, they create art to the art, and they share their screens with strangers and discuss and give feedback to strangers while on a Discord call. And for me, I know that because when I usually talk about constant voice chatting and being on Discord, a lot of managers are skeptical, to say the least, when I present this idea to them. But although I understand the perspective and I respect it, I think I'm going with the Zoomers on that one, because Zoomers are not forced in any way to share their screen and join voice chats, and yet they do so anyway, because it just kind of gives you this ability to, and what is most important for me in voice chat, that you're able to work, so your eyes are on the screen where you work, but you're able to communicate with other people. So you can do it with a video call, but then you're not really looking at the video, so it's redundant. So you can just talk and work. of course, not every work will be talking, not every work will be conducive to talking, but a lot of it is, and it just kind of gives this feeling. If the most nerdy of you may check Lev Manovich's Language of New Media, when he says about telepresence, so being able to create things at a distance and being present at a distance. So a bastardized version of his concept is absolutely present in game dev, thanks to Discord and thanks to, of course, Git and being able to kind of immediately see the effects of one another's work. Now, of course, I'm not saying to not use text chat. Text chat is like the third part of the Holy Trinity. So we have like voice chats, we have the video call as like the least important, and we have text chat as the second or the first most important. And text chat for me should also be used as much of a public space as possible, and of course divided into channels. And but the function of the text chat is not should not really be immediate communication, because it requires you to stop working on whatever you are working. It should more be like light archiving. So you are discussing something, you need to write it down, and of course, I think that you should relegate discussion of specific ticket issues to set tickets in your project management tool, so it doesn't really become messy. But you can't really do that often. So people will, for example, play the game together, then they will notice something, they will quickly post a screenshot to the chat, so you have this kind of embryonic form of a bug ticket that the QA should just then take out from the chat and place into project management tool. So for me, the text chat is this intermediary place, and it also swallows some of the functions of email. So notifications, plans, integrations should be done through text chat. Now, of course, use all those methods of like pinned posts, group team pings, opening threads, and replies to specific posts. And the replies and threads are low-key incredibly important, because I also asked my students this, like, what did you feel the difference when Facebook added like the ability to open threads and reply with chats with your friends? And they said that yes, with certain friends, I am now able to have like multi-topic conversations incredibly coherently, because it kind of just it gives you more processing power, the ability to open threads, open replies. This is low-key incredibly important and allows for a much more coherent discussion, even in such a chaotic thing as a chat room. So use a quick voting tool, use like spam channels, music channels, what I did this weekend for team bonding, because of course, some people still will not really be comfortable with talking with people or showing up, so just give them the avenue to write and share memes or share games that they are playing. Now, email. I personally, I am against email very much. This is because, for me, email is not useful to anyone who is not really working with the outside world. So if you have like a lead programmer that has to communicate with AVS, yes. If you have a manager who has to manage outsourced teams and members, yes, of course. But if you have a person that just works completely internally with just other team members, they usually don't check their email at all. So of course, it's all usually a part of G Suite and stuff like that. So use it, but I think it's on the way out. If Discord and stuff like that kind of gets more developed over time, I don't think it will really be that much necessary. Of course, apart from creating tool accounts on the email. But this, of course, this is a different thing. As a communication tool, I'm not really a fan of it, basically. Now, this kind of brings us, I will just skip through it very much, because it's a very big slide. Like, internally, there is a lot of moving things here. Because effectively, if your whole production communication, if your project management, if your administration, if your HR is already digital, then just centralize it. Create a knowledge management tool and allow people to very quickly find tutorials, procedures, and like every possible information, like orders for the IT or reservations for chill rooms at the office if you're using it. So try to create it into a one system because it will streamline a lot of production between different teams, and it will disincentivize teams to create their own little knowledge management systems, little wikias or little databases if they have like one workable system. Yes, and also because I also noticed that certain companies that did this then had no person to actually take care of the knowledge management system. So it kind of became a glorified archive. So there were like some HR articles, there were some administrative procedures, there was maybe one window where you can order stuff from the IT department, but that was it, and like a few old posts. So if you're doing it, do it right, but know that effectively you are creating this administration whatever you want it or not. It will be, this data will be somewhere, maybe spread between different programs, but it will be somewhere, so just why not centralize it? Now, going into even more practical things and hardware. I don't think that will be very controversial. At least 2 monitors for every employee. And 2 monitors because 1 monitor is for working and 1 is for communication. And communication with other team members or communication with documentation or reference. Of course, you can work on 2, but if you are using something to communicate, if you are sharing screen, etc., usually you just need those 2. Tablets can be used as monitors for prolonged periods of work from a laptop on the move. And every employee that may be asked to move needs to have a laptop. Because if you have a laptop and you're moving about, for example, as an HR or a manager, you can go by train, you can work on the train, so you're not wasting your time, you're not wasting company time, and then you can come up to a team member, have a talk with them in person, go back via train, work, and it just, once the management team and the HR team kind of learns this, it can become much more efficient, and it's much more annoying. It's much more annoying to be asked by the company to travel for a long period of time and then effectively waste that time because you're neither working, neither you are really relaxing in the train. Now, voice quality beats image quality every time. Optimized for microphones, not cameras, and every YouTuber and streamer will tell you the same thing. Like, voice is most important, and it will become very grating if you have a low quality microphone. Make employees aware of lesser-known office issues and empower them to experiment. So have test hardware. So don't buy a new toy for everyone, balls for everyone, or like those things where you kneel while you work. So don't buy everyone these things all the time, but have like 1 or 2 to allow them to test it out and see if they like it. For example, large headphones worn for hours can create inflammation in your ear or like fungal infections. And this is often not really thought about, so you need to have alternatives for that. Vertical mouse can partially alleviate wrist pain and decrease chances of a carpal tunnel. So there are a lot of things. Don't expect that people will know all those things on their own. Like talk with them as an office manager, talk with them if they have any problems, and find ways to solve them for a minimal cost, obviously. Now, general IT and software, I'm completely against spying on employees, not just because on moral grounds, but because spying disincentivizes transparent communication, which again hits communication overall in your team, and this hits productivity directly in a remote environment. So, but have a big stick. So walk softly, but carry a big stick. So the big stick will be have procedures in place to wipe disks remotely, take away control of the employees if they do anything sus, and also train managers to do this, because usually they will mess up somewhere along the road, and they need to know what to do when that happens. Use as few apps as possible. Consider single sign-on solutions to expedite logging in if your IT security allows it. So throw out apps unused by the team or ones whose functionalities are effectively doubled by some other software. And limit useless notifications, because if you have a lot of notifications, then they stop working. So just keep some ecosystem and budget here. Now, we have just 10 minutes, so we should be able to go through this. So I already spelled out some ideas about remote management that I came to over those few years. So, but apart from that, be careful when offering completely flexible hours, because this can throw out any communication and coordination out of whack completely, especially if you combine flexible hours with no clear, discernible way to know when a person is working. This may create a situation where you're just kind of coming into work, and you notice that the guy you needed for this whole day's work is just ending. So he's like on his last 2 hours or last 3 hours. I would suggest also written dailies. If you have flexible hours and remote work, then like obligatory in-person dailies with video calls can become really weird and really kind of not working, because you're effectively making a daily in the middle of someone's workday. So it just kind of throws, again, everything out of whack. And if you create a written daily, this can double as this punch-in cards. So a person will know when someone started. Like, for example, if they punch in at 8, then, and if you start at 10, you know that you have like 2 hours less to talk with this person. Now, limit planned meetings in favor of organic ones, but this is like general management. Never punish for issues or mistakes which came to light because of transparency. Limit if someone is secretive or is hiding things from you, but don't punish them for accidentally messing something up and showing it to you, because they will just stop showing things to you, and you don't want that. For now, a lot of your work will go into developing good remote habits, because people are still not really exactly used to this, and we have no golden standards. Now, and manage, take on basic tasks yourself so that you will crash test the systems that you set up. This is a good thing that I notice about onboarding myself to remote companies. I just take a random task, whatever I can manage to do, and then I try to do it as fast as possible to see if I have all the permissions, if I have all the material, if the database that I'm taking it from actually exists, if a person who needs this actually needs this. So it's a good way to just kind of see how much of the things you see, how much of the documentation, how much of like management practices and processes are just fluff, and how much actually exists. And manage deliverables more than time. And this is more of a pie in the sky goal, but you should manage, you should check for deliverables and not check how long people are working. And you shouldn't check how much people are working, because you can't really control them. If they want to cheat you, they will cheat. And I know it because I was both a manager and an employee. I know the game from both sides. So I know all the tips and tricks how to do it. So don't control them, try to incentivize them. And if you have secret channels of communication at your workplace, it's okay. They will trash talk you, that's the game. But if they coordinate work through secret channels of communication, then you have critical failure of management at your company, because then you can't really trust your own documentation and your own productivity at your own company, because people are hiding stuff from you, even in terms of work, and not just like their jokes or their humor or whatever else. Now, tolerate off-topic conversations as long as the team seems to get things done and develop some self-discipline. And they will, at first, they will off-top a lot, but then they will learn. You are effectively herding cats as a remote manager. And I have 5 minutes, so I will just quickly go through from the other side of the aisle. Self-management. Working remotely effectively turns you into a self-employed dev in terms of life dynamics. So learn to pace yourself and don't stretch out your work there over your entire day, because you have flexible hours, so you can just work from 6 a.m. to like 12 and then be miserable for your whole life. Manage time more than deliverables. So as a manager, you manage deliverables. As an employee, you manage time. And really, really work on that. Learn the discipline to work early, preferably, and then just stop working, because you will burn out incredibly fast if you do it like that. Extra hours are easy to take on, so take advantage. So, discipline, but it's easy to work overtime if you want to, if you need the money right now. So, and try to include physical chores in your work breaks. Yeah, because there are a lot of like those cool people who tell you that, oh, you should exercise, do push-ups. I'm not doing push-ups normally. I'm not going to start now. But I can do physical things between my work. So the laundry, go to the shop, go with my dog, and then I just, I double duty, basically. And home office, separate your workplace from the rest of your home, either physically or by using a different machine. If all else fails, use a separate systems account for work. I don't really have to tell you why that is important, especially if you are trying to search something on Google on screen sharing. Noises in the background are completely unprofessional and should be called ruthlessly. So I had people who had like this farm sounds, like dogs, children, their wife, And like, it's terrible. Don't do it. Having a mic always on sounds scary, but most people never forget to mute it. Your super fast internet may be hobbled by too many devices connected to your budget router. And this often happens if you have like a partner who also works remotely and you have like 15 devices that are connecting to the same Wi-Fi. And when you work on the go, try setting up in different cafes, libraries as a test. You will quickly find issues that will also come up later in hotel rooms. So this is like, being a digital nomad is a whole different thing. Test it out before you kind of throw yourself into the deep water with that. And I managed everything in time. Thank you very much, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Robert, for your knowledge, for your know-how. Thank you for sharing it with us. If you have any questions for Robert, so this time for the questions.
I just wonder if you have some experience with billing methods for contracts of employment, other kind of hours-related
with hours
employment contract.
I had a few because I was outsourcing people. I was both working with outsourcing. I was working with people on different kinds of contracts. But honestly, taxes come later. The problem is with actually trying to, okay, maybe the thing is the deliverables. So I think that it's easier to just create a contract for a deliverable with certain employees, because then they will have to manage deliverables and not time. So if they are paid by deliverable, then this problem comes out of your head, unless your production or management team changes the deliverable during the contract. Because they say, oh, we wanted you to do this 2 months ago, but we no longer want to do it. And I don't think there's a cheat code there. And if you have someone hired per hour, then again, is a different kind of thing. So I can really help with taxes, if that was your question, but. Yeah, with billing, with small teams, it often didn't work very much. Because the problem is, because you are kind of trying to count those hours for something. So you can try to count them to know how expensive a certain feature was, but if you're...
You said you worked for QA, so for example, you had a couple of projects, tests. So I'm just asking, like, maybe you counted automatically there.
Oh, yeah.
How many hours did you spend on this game? How many hours did you spend
on this way. Okay, yeah. I never seen, like, every tool I've used was the same amount of annoying. So, like, there was SRM, I think, stuff like that. So I haven't found a good way to do it. It was always annoying, and in the example you gave, exactly, I did exactly that. I was counting my hours, but I think I did it manually as a QA, because you just don't need very powerful tools if you have like 6 guys somewhere. Yes, that's why I said that, because I would be interested to see in a big company how that exactly works in a big company where you have like 20, maybe 30, 40, 50, 60 across different departments. So as a small team, you don't really need a lot of those. You just need kind of trust, to build trust in your employees and allow them to check upon each other essentially, or you check upon them. So you become more active in the actual process of production, and their screen sharing helps, because if there's screen share, you can check if they are lying or not, basically.
Okay, so you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question about, well, basically changing work culture. Because, like you said, with this new workplace you went to, there was a mandatory system of voice channels that everyone had to stay in when they were working. But what are your views on actually implementing those systems during, like, not at onboarding, and when they're part of the team culture, but basically introducing them to a team that's already used to a different type of work environment?
Okay, I will give you a very cynical perspective very quickly. So you need to first check if the thing you want to implement is even possible at all, because like work culture is like this great word that you can just throw at everything. Like something works, yeah, it's work culture. Like our internet is down, yeah, it's work culture. So you can just throw it out and it doesn't mean anything. So you need to first check if something is possible. That is why I'm looking at Zoomers, right? Because they do it. So I know it's possible without incentives, really. Like they just do it internally. So once you have that, then you need to create your own little group of support among the devs. So talk with them. You don't just go out and create culture because you want to. Find your own clique, especially people who are charismatic, who have a lot of friends. Convince them personally, and then take them into your initiative. So they will prop up your authority, and they will be motivated because it will be their idea to implement it. If you will just try to be this manager who just throws things out devs, they will quickly learn to dislike you very much. So don't do it.
Okay, so the last question, do we have... Okay, so...
So you mentioned constant screen sharing for employees, and I can imagine that would get quite a bit of pushback from anyone here in the room as well. So how do you actually convince people that this is something useful for them rather than a surveillance thing you mentioned to avoid, right?
I would not suggest forcing every developer to share screen. That's the thing, that you have to force juniors and onboarding hires so that you can see what they are doing, because you're effectively doubling the thing that you have a buddy that is sitting with you and he just looks at your hands next to you to see what you're doing. So for hires, new hires and onboarding, yes. For long-time devs, don't force it because they will hate it, but don't attack them for it, and then maybe you share your screen. You can show your screen in the engine and say, oh, I have a problem here. Could you tell me what to do here? And more often than not, they will share their screen to say, look at how I'm doing this. And because it's screen sharing is inherently easy to do, but people are not doing it because they are afraid of the consequences, that you will see that you're slacking off, or that you see that they are not working on the task they are working at. If they are not fearful of that, they will do it naturally. I'm fairly convinced that they will do it naturally if they just are not scared, basically.
Okay, so thank you, Robert. Thank you for your questions. If you have any more questions, I think Robert will be happy to answer them in the corridor. So have a nice day and see you in the next lectures.